I think it's important that we understand as we talk about, HIV and how it affects trans people is the social factors that contribute for trans people and particularly trans women of color to become infected. The lack of opportunities to obtain basic needs or services, such as housing or employment or education. We are pushed into participate and engage in the trade economy, like sex work, like drug use, those things that continue to criminalize us. Not only that, but it puts us in a vulnerable situation to where many of us, we have to probably do risky activities that will put us in a position to get infected. So if a client offers more money, let's say, to have unprotected sex, more likely trans women who do not have the ability to have their basic needs met, such as, maybe food or a roof over her head at that particular moment, chances are that she will take the risk. She will take the chance. And that's just because, you know, she wants those immediate needs to be addressed and not really thinking of her future. We are the population that has the highest incidence of HIV than any other population. So I'm originally from Mexico, and I came to the United States when I was about 17 years old. It was probably around 1985 or maybe 86. And I came to live with my father, who at that time was living in Central California. I went to work, and so I was bored, lonely. I knew who I was, but I couldn't really be me. And so I decided to leave. And that's how I came to Los Angeles. I was all by myself, and I wanted to live my life authentically. And at that time, there was no services for trans people, particularly trans women. So community and resources, you would find them on the streets. And that's how I started my transition when I was about 19 years old. Soon after I got to Los Angeles, I met this man on the streets because I was doing sex work. This man picked me up, and because I was homeless, I was, just living the street life, I went home with him. And then I began a very abusive relationship with this man. And I was with him close to 3 years. And until finally, I was about 21 years old when we separated, and that's when I decided to go take a test. And my test, my diagnosis was positive. My life up until that point have been always drugs and, sex and rock and roll, like they said. At that particular moment in my life, everything went sort of like down here because when I received that diagnosis, I saw that my life was going to be, or the end result of my life was going to be like the death of my friends, the death of the people that I knew. And so I didn't want to even experience that. And for me, the solution was to use drugs like at a more rapid way. I sort of like went into this suicide mission. But what ended up happening, and in some ways I think, it sort of like saved my life in some ways, was that I started getting arrested. And for about 13 years of my life, I spent in the prison industrial complex. And it was until, it was exactly in July of 2001 when I got out, the last time of prison. I started back on the quest of what I knew what to do, which was using drugs and the street life. But there was a particular moment, specifically, it was on June 6th of 2001 when I sort of like saw my life passing through my eyes. I was over 30 years old, in my life was really nothing. At that particular moment, I had been using drugs, smoking crack and heroin and all of that I used to do for about 3 days, nonstop. I asked someone for some money to eat, and this African American woman gave me $5. I got me something to eat, and then I don't know how I got on a bus, and I ended up in a treatment center. When was at this treatment center, I enrolled in a computer class to learn basic computer skills because I didn't know how to even do that. There was a position open at a social service organization doing HIV prevention, specifically targeting trans women. And so I applied for the position. And I was the lucky one to get the position. And from there, sort of like my career of activism sort of like started. The same year, the murder of Gwen Araujo happened. Gwen Araujo was a young trans girl who was brutally murdered in Newark, California. It sort of like woke up the beast on me. Her experience, it was the experience that I was still seeing in my community. And it also helped me reflect in my own experiences and what I could do in order to change that. That's how sort of like my career in this path of doing HIV prevention, working for immigration rights, working for trans people, LGBTQ Latinos, incarceration. I mean, I often say that I am an intersection walking. And because I am one of the chosen few, I want to make sure that I, in some ways, give back. The Trans-Latino Coalition is a national advocacy organization that started in 2009 as a grassroots organization or group to address the specific needs and issues of the Trans-Latino community who at that time were immigrants. We started focusing on the issues of Trans-Latino immigrant individuals who lived in this country, but then we transitioned into just include the Trans-Latino community as a whole. We did a national study to really understand what were the specific needs and issues of Trans-Latina immigrant women. And what we found out in this study was that Trans-Latina immigrant women who come to this country running away from violence. I think it's important that we understand also how the system is set up, right, that makes us, for us to fail and also to make us susceptible to become HIV infected. When trans women who have their cases pending and they get released with no documentation to give them the opportunity to get those basic things, right, such as to get a job. And so the system pushes us into engage in sex work, let's just say that. And the other thing is that when trans Latina immigrant women come to this country, also do not necessarily speak the language. So that's another barrier that we encounter. But also, I think what influences is how we see trans people in general within our society. So if you have these layers of oppression, right, such as if you're an immigrant, if you're trans, if you don't speak English, and if you don't, if you don't have all of these things, then obviously the challenges are greater. And because of all of these challenges, that's how trans Latina immigrant women we become infected.